Winol. Welcome to another episode of MMA Vision Analysis. Yoel Romero, former opponent of Adesanya, has some words of wisdom directed towards the last style bender. I think there's a lot of wisdom personally in what Yoel is saying. If Izzy decides to keep fighting, that is. We're going to get into Yoel's comments, the 47-year-old super athlete, really, Yoel. Before getting started, make sure to like, subscribe, click that notification to get all of this that is new from this channel, your channel, one and only MMA Vision Analysis. The mixed martial arts game, specifically the UFC, it's a highly demanding game. When we're talking about the UFC, we're talking about the top of the pyramid in terms of obviously mixed martial arts athlete. And realistically, there aren't any easy fights, is precisely what I'm trying to say here. I'm not sure if anybody who enters the UFC thinks of an easy fight or an easier route. There's no such thing. I remember a time when Al LaQuinta stepped in it was pretty much a last-minute replacement fighter. I believe it was Tony Ferguson. Madison Square Garden, matter of fact, Habib Nurmagomedov was the opponent. And I remember Al LaQuinta gave Habib the hardest time out of all of his opponents. If you were to exclude that guillotine that Poirier almost had him in. But what I'm trying to say here is that you may look at a guy in the first glance, it may seem like it's an easy fight, but there's really no such thing. I believe many people that are not aware of Nusratdin Imavov prior to Adesanya fight probably thought that was going to be somewhat of a way for Izzy to bounce back, and perhaps part of Izzy thought the same as well. Even though I highly doubt that Izzy thought that about Nusratdin, I think some fans perhaps came up with that conclusion. Obviously, Yoel talks about his former opponent, and he believes that Izzy just simply needs a break. He needs to take his time. But he also adds that unfortunately for him, it's not really up to him whether he wants to take time or not, because if the UFC calls and they have a fight in mind, and obviously the fighting pride of a guy like Izzy, no one's going to say no, right? Izzy's not going to say no. And the UFC is not going to somehow, deliberately, treat you differently from any other contender in that middleweight division, which is fair, really, right? But Izzy, 3 losses in a row. Some of those losses were, I don't want to say embarrassing, but most certainly not looking like the Izzy of past. And according to Yoel, that's due to the damage that the guy's been taking. So maybe Izzy should take a break, right? Maybe I'm not so opposed to that. But at the same time, I think Izzy has to think about his future, in the middleweight division, UFC generally speaking. While taking into consideration his legacy that's really being tarnished fight by fight. Just 3 years ago, this guy was undoubtedly the UFC's biggest star. Now, a lot of that, and that's what the game does to you. Look at Alex Pereira, look at Anderson Silva, now Izzy, Tony Ferguson, and people blame Habib for retiring in his prime. At the end of the day, the game really does not care about you. Just a lot of the time wants to see you lose. I think that's why a lot of people want to see Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall, because finally they think a 37-year-old Jon Jones can finally be beaten by Tom Aspinall. Even if that fight was to happen and Johnny was to lose, I would never change the way that I look at Jon Jones, because quite frankly, a 32-year-old Jon Jones versus a 32-year-old Tom Aspinall, let's say that fight takes place in the light heavyweight division, we all know the conclusion to that fight. There is no doubt, right? I'm not saying that somehow a 37-year-old John Jones is not as skillful. Most certainly the skill's still there, but not the agility, the speed, the reaction time. Most certainly not. So what I'm trying to say here is that this is an unforgiving game. And it's an individual sport. It's not like, it's a soccer player that can, easily walk away from the game after, easy last season, playing 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and you have other people carrying the weight. That's not necessarily the case for older players, but obviously, when it's a team sport, you notice it way less than you do with individual sports. Individual sports is not forgiving. Obviously, the smallest margins is what separates these guys, and that's how Izzy's losing. Because literally, you're competing against the best in the world. And it's okay to be a step behind the best in the world. I think Izzy's had his time, and now it's time to make some smart decisions in terms of matchmaking and in terms of breaks and in terms of being, let's say, deliberate with our approach to fights. And perhaps, as Yoel mentions, perhaps we need to tone down the training as well. Don't go so hard in sparring sessions and whatnot. If you made it this far, appreciate you for sticking around. Please let me know what you think in the comments, or subscribe for more.